Julie here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and the world is shifting. So one of my biggest predictions, which was that we'll have a new way to count the time, is beginning to be borne out. This is Eco News, and talking about goodbye to the 24 hours day. From this date onward, days on Earth will last 25 hours, and predicting that we'll begin to count 25 hours a day. Now, this is supposedly according to the Earth's rotation. Um, they expect the Earth's rotation to keep slowing down, but the change is so gradual that it is invisible in everyday life. Now, a day is not as fixed as it sounds, and so on. So, basically, we're beginning to have science taking a look at time differently. And by the way, right before it showed up, I was thinking about time. I was thinking about time. So, this is the world taking a look at time differently. And let's see if I've uploaded the previous episode. Still watching this conglomerate. And I had a meditation about Aries that I'm not yet sharing. Yes. But this is quite exciting because Saturn, Neptune, right now at the end of Pisces, but also going into Aries, is about, with Saturn, Neptune in Pisces, we are thinking about different notions of time. With Saturn going into Aries, we might enact, okay, Mars action planet, um, different time frames. And this is Mars hour indeed. Um, yeah, the midheaven is approaching my lot of divination. And we'll have to, okay, how should I say that? Electricity came to the forefront when, with the industrialized age, where they needed to have the light on for the workers to work. Extending the counting of hours to a 25-hour day might come with an expectation that the working hours would be extended. Now, with Uranus going into Gemini, people are expecting, particularly when we see how well it works to work less time, how time becomes a quality when we spend less of it. Okay? And by the way, if you have children and you want to teach them about being able to grow, whether it's their own food or not, one of the most successful, usually people give children the grass hair because grass is one of the things that grow anyway. Um, I wouldn't say nettle because that can sting, but stuff like amaranth, chrysanthemum, and for those that can afford it, even crops that grow far away and are native to the land, because it not only serves as a preservation, but also it's it's a fail-proof method to grow. And if you want to teach children about being able to grow, then that's a great thing to do. Or for people that had really hard time trying to grow crops. I remember when I first tried, a sweet potato that was considered a fail-proof crop. I tried it, then I tried to invert it, then I tried this, then I tried that. Never managed to grow sweet potato. And it's like it's one of the most simple crops out there. And this is why I'm saying, if you take an amaranth or you take a chrysanthemum, that is probably one of the most simple things that give a success experience to people that failed growing crops. Saturn. And we also need to preserve food because I came up with the prediction that the Svalbards um, could be okay. The places where they, whether it's Svalbard or the places where they keep the seeds or where they keep the food, could be bombed as well. Then I don't like to say such things without offering a solution. And this is where national governance usually would support children growing crops or people growing something from seed. In fact, during COVID, I went to a holistic health practitioner and she told me, you need to grow something from seed. And so we always listen to the doctor in that regard. I know I teach patient sovereignty a lot. Um, but in that case, it's like, hey, if a person is bringing plant teachers to me, then I listen and I do, and I went particularly to buy some seeds and keep the soil humid, and it was I think sage seeds, and I was looking at the moon transit and so on. Nothing grew. But then I saw, wait, people that recover from sexual boundary violation, they grow stuff, and and they begin to eat from their crops, and I'm like, everybody. I had a friend that worked for the agrarian municipality, and there were people beginning to grow their food or growing their tomatoes and all these things that I never thought about. And for me, when I think about it, I was probably supposed to be one of the people that didn't manage to grow anything and stopped. But I didn't stop there, and I kept trying. One time the plant was too big. One time the the plant that holds the plant was too big. One time it was too small. One time too dry. One time I thought that I would give them vitamins and and they died. And um, and it took a lot of time to master that ability. If I think about it, I can. Well, trying to pick up the nettle, it came with the root, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with that? And so I planted it, and it's like it's happy. There wasn't enough light for the tomatoes. That is kind of like a bulletproof growth. They grew up in 7th of October, okay? And I'm like, there's not enough light in this room for the tomatoes, but it's like, but the nettle is happy. And my prediction is that governments will begin to encourage people to grow these particular plants at home because we're not going to have enough in the stocks and the bunkers because those will be bombed. And this is also, it's also a good policy to enact because the crops that grow anyway give a good growing experience, something that every child can do. And it's also a good experience for the children and for the adults that couldn't grow anything because we're going to need a lot of entrepreneurs. We're gonna need a lot of people that can grow new stuff, that can sustain a global havoc. Israel acknowledged Somaliland independence from Somalia. And people say, yeah, of course, they don't want to acknowledge Palestine. Well, Israel is not stupid. It knows that people will say Palestine. um, Greenland. I saw short by a lady that left Congo to live in Japan. And now all the origin flag operations, okay, and people wanting to come to celebrate their origin. We love, we love it when we can buy, let's say, um, if I one of the shops that I love to go to in Israel is a Dutch shop that sells Dutch products. Okay, because it reminds me of my other home. When I was in Netherlands, I was homeless and I traveled to meet a lady that had a package of black coffee. Over nothing. It's not something that is too endearing for me in Israel. That being said, if people cannot find their Dutch shop, okay, if people could, if I went Albert Heijn, okay, Dutch chocolate. There wasn't Dutch chocolate in Albert Heijn. This is, I don't mind that Albert Heijn is Turkish. But if I can't find Dutch chocolate there, how am I going to see the Albert Heijn as one of the national supermarkets? It's food. It sells food. That being said, when I was homeless, I could get with 1.5 euros the particular Dutch delicacy of the marzipan cakes that kept me alive. And not only that, the fact that I could get away with stealing food from the Albert Heijn probably means that if I arrive in Netherlands and I have money, I'll probably buy a very big purchase directly in that supermarket and maybe give it to the homeless people. But I have to see that the place is ritual abuse free before I invest in that. So, what's that to do with Aries? Because Saturn is time and Aries is entrepreneurship. When I was living in Arad and I began to grow stuff and also harvest from Jupiter was in Taurus, so it was an excellent year for crops. And I would eat from the environmental fridge. And then I began to prepare things or give from the crops to the environmental fridge. And sometimes it would be 5 small cherry tomatoes. For the period in between, because there's a lot of targeted individuals, there was even a question, hey, does the food in the fridge comes to those who really need that, or not to take too much from the fridge, and so on and so forth, which was very challenging. But this is exactly the time that it takes to grow something that actually yields. This is why Saturn Aries is, although one of the most difficult signs, yields a lot of entrepreneurships that stand the test of time. And so the 25-hour day probably have expectation in it that those who want to create a world order that stands the test of time should not be tempted by. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't think differently of time. In fact, for a time meditation, I would recommend to think about the concept of Sommerøy. And Sommerøy is an island in Norwegian that decided to ditch time. Now, it sounds like, oh, they're a pack of lazy people sunbathing. They're living in the Arctic. What they're doing by ditching time is not ditching time itself, is when people live in a 6 months darkness, 6 months light environment, what dictates the time is the environment. If they live with that environment, they live. That's the Arctic. It changes the concept of responsibility. Now time gives us clues. Okay? For me, if I began 2018-19, if I began to first try to grow something from seed, looking at the cycle of the moon, that plant being a sage, and that completely tanked. And then I learned to dig half moons, and I learned so many rewilding, and I learned so many. In fact, one of my attempts to do rewilding and to have the wild plants giving shade to the peppers and the tomatoes was misunderstood as neglecting. Okay, now eventually coming to the crops that grow anyway and paying attention to the crops in the land around me. What do they do? Where am I? And how the feeding off of the land with the things that grow anyway is so very relevant. This the connection. It's the plant teachers are not plant teachers by teaching us. It's the connection that teaches. Now, if they decided to make it a lovely city and mow the lawns and so on and so forth, we would lose that connection with all the medical ailments that arise when we don't feed from these crops. So Uranus at the end of Taurus is bringing it together. From an agrarian society where The farmers are not allowed to replant the seeds without permission. Two, the survivalistic, with Saturn's almost at Aries, where it's survivalistic, and governments are actually going to have to ask people to grow things so that they will sustain a war. The governments that will be smart enough to do that will sustain their sovereignty. No individual sovereignty, no sovereignty. Okay? A country can't take human rights away and then cry about reason. By the way, I almost managed to kill an amaranth. Do not mess with a person that almost managed to kill an amaranth. It's older than your country. But definitely the prediction that we're going to be even counting the time differently. Okay, an action on time to count the time in a new way. Aries is also origin. What is the origin of time? Okay, when you think about the Earth rotation around the sun, the days of darkness and days of light. This is the origin. If we go to the Arctic, okay. And speaking as an astrologer, one of the things that fascinated me about Someroi is that it's a timeless, but it's not actually timeless. It is in tune with the origin of time. This is also when I talk about astrology as the art of staying attuned and being being in time with the spirit of the times, or predicting the spirit of the time, which is forming connection with future timelines. This is why it's associated with Aquarius, and being able to form connection and connect the past timelines and future timelines. Okay, the inductive and deductive logic. There's a reason why an astrologer was called mathematikoi, because math was a holistic science. It was both discovered and invented. A talisman is an equation set in stone. When I was working on the bisextile talismans, and I was writing basically the planets, so this trines this, conjuncts this, and I was like, wait a second, I'm writing an equation. And now the moon is with Neptune. Now, in the Arctic, it's very obvious. If people don't get prepared on time for the winter, they can't work in a factory and get prepared on time for the winter. And this is also why Pluto in the sign of Saturn, which it has been in Capricorn since 2008 and now in Aquarius tropically, is understanding that we cannot hand over the power of on the time to an external authority. This is Saturn in Aries with Saturn ruling Pluto. We can't depend on the timetables and the schedules that are presented to us without questioning, without asking, without understand what is it that we need to adapt to. The time dictated by men or the time of the days and lights and so on and so forth. And when we do a technology to change the daylight, people are going to have a deeper desire to ask themselves, is this technology supportive of me? Or do I need to go back to the origin of time? Pluto, Saturn in Aries, going back to the origin of time and seeing, should I adapt to the origin of time? Wait a second. In the origin of time, I need not adapt because I remember, because I am the origin of time. This is Saturn in Aries. I am Aries, the origin, Aries of time, Saturn. I am the origin of my time. I am the time. The time is aligned with the I am, not because I am the time over others, but because I am my time. And that's where people are gonna try to take the time from people, are gonna fall into the abyss. Because whatever comes through Aries is the I am. Okay, Chiron. For example, a lot of people with Chiron can feel that they are the wound or the wounded healer. It's like why all people in the world feel they are the wounded healer. Yeah, Chiron is going through Aries right now. This is what astrology can do. Then people have placements in Aries. Aries is identity. Okay, I have Mercury in Aries for many years. And people ask me, who are you? I'm a writer. Neptune about to go. And then, Chiron came in and was like, what do you do for a living? I'm an entrepreneur. Something to do with innovation, something to do with Aries, basically. That's the best way to address the wound around what do you do for a living in the age of, in this day and age, in this economy. Now, Saturn going through Aries, Saturn is time. You try to collect the debt from a person with Saturn in Aries, they tell you, I am the collector. What about the children you buried alive? What about the structure of the economy? What about my ability to innovate and participate? I had to do it all by myself. It's a lot of time, money, and energy that I invested in me with having no one around me helping me to do that, doing that in spite of your system. In fact, you owe me some money. You owe me some lifelong compensations for the things that you prescribed. There are going to be a lot of, I'm not saying class lawsuits, the structure of how lawsuits are made is going to be different, going to be new way. Okay, for example, during COVID, Israel has Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, as the fourth house. If we take the Libra ascendant, the way they dealt with the fines around the masks in COVID, they filed individual appeals. Within no time, they canceled a lot of the fines. They couldn't reinforce things bureaucratically because the people took the bureaucratic tool and brought it against those who tried to use that against them. Now the Palestinians have Moon in Capricorn. They decided to make it expensive to colonize them. They talked about the za'atar and they talked about the olive oil, and they connected people through the trees, through the crops. A Palestinian person saying, hey, the Israel coming. Now it's not Israel, it's oil companies. People equate the country with the oil company associated with that. We're going to have a really hard time with the attempts to reassemble Standard Oil as a global one world company, which is connected to supposedly one world governance. But a Palestinian saying, well, I cannot pick my za'atar. Why? But these people, they come and they say, I'm not allowed to pick my za'atar. You're not allowed to pick the natural crops that grows on the land. Okay? There's not a single person on the face of the earth that doesn't get angry, including Israelis. Somebody could have, you know how many times people say, oh, I don't have food, I don't have this. People answer, what do you want? Go pick the crops, go pick the mellows, go pick the dandelions. They say, I live in a city. Somebody would tell an Israeli they can't pick the mellows. The Knesset is going, the parliament is going on fire the next day. The Palestinians knew that, so they talked about the za'atar. And the discussion about the za'atar is making one very important distinction. Are you with Standard Oil or are you with life? Okay? Not in the sense of pro-life with the okay? Are you going with oil or are you going with having viable food that can sustain you through a famine, that can sustain you through a war, that can sustain you? Now, people look at what is happening in Gaza and say, okay, they're having a cashless society after a disaster. It's not that people care about, oh, the Palestinian people and the indigenous people. No, it's about human rights. What do people care about? There's no human rights. And what about Somalia? What about Congo? Wait a second. They instill their 2030 agenda in praxis. There's not a single person not looking at what's happening in Gaza saying, okay, that's how it works there. Will the people resist? How does the region respond? And everybody talks about Israel because we can't say Standard Oil because everybody's invested in a company that's going to merge, consolidate world with a shit ton of babies buried alive with Standard Oil. Now, you say, Shili, how come you feel so confident talking about it? What do you mean? Because I'm coming to innovate, because I'm the point of interference, because I am the solution when all fails. What's holistic health practitioner? People went to this doctor and that 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 doctor. They're desperate, they're broke. And I know that because I have been people. I try to work a safety job. I try in this sector, in that sector, in that sector. Try to study a degree. Try to study holistic health practitioner. Right? Then I say, okay, let's take a look at the. Oh, children are buried alive for the. That explains some stuff. How do we expect our children to be the benefactors of our investments, even with trust funds, if that's how our investments are created? When I want to live anyway, then I eat from the things that grow anyway. Also, if I wanted, you know, the name Warren Buffett comes along. If I wanted to invest in a company that would grow anyway, or that would sustain its value anyway, I would say, are there companies preserving amaranths? Now, what if I open such a company and I invest in my own company? Now I'm a conglomerate. What if I open my own company and invest in my own company and don't rape children or don't rape? Now I have strategic advantage over entire planet Earth. I'm basically safer investment than Vanguard and BlackRock together. And in fact, to invest in my company, they would have to cleanse the rituals around children and people. There will have to be zero human trafficking, zero slavery, zero ritual abuse companies. All they'll have to face the bubbles of the internal structures, the convoluted structures, the cult-like structures, dissolving, molding, melting, radiating from within. Not an ultimatum. They're not dependent on me. They can pick up a crop. You say, where's your competitive advantage? It's a blue ocean. By the time it's a red ocean, I know myself more, and it grows anyway. Warren Buffett say invest in a company that any stupid person can run because sure enough, some stupid person will. Well, let's study the amaranth. It withstood the entire stupidity of Earth. World wars, holocausts, Congo, Somalia and Somaliland, Palestine, Israel, Standard Oil. I almost managed to kill it without trying. And it's still alive. Even the lousiest caregivers can grow amaranth. In fact, amaranth will tell us if we're actually going to space or we're just because the question, can you grow that on space, becomes practical. Nobody will ever say, oh, amaranths rape children. It's not subjected to extortion cults. When all else fails, we're gonna need the amaranths. That's the type of business we're talking about with Saturn in Aries. Oil we can do without. Now going to back to the question, why you feel so comfortable talking about Standard Oil? I'm predicting tendencies. I'm giving them free service. They get a free reading. They could pay 1 billion astrologers and none of them would give them that reading. And if they would come anywhere near close, they would have to go to the origin. I am the origin. That's Aries. Now, Aries Saturn, people are going to see themselves as the origin of time. Whether it's conscious or not, they are going to face the fact that they are time, that the I am is time. I am my time. What does that mean? It means that if I try to give power to someone else over my time, I basically gave them power over the I am. Now, when they're going to come complaining to me, I'm going to remind them that. They say, hey, you wanted power over my time. Now you're complaining to me about what I do with my time? No, I was complaining that you are like this and you are like this. I am like this because I am my time. If I have time to rest, time to sleep well, spend quality time, I am a certain person. You try to take away my time and complain about who I am when you take away my time. Don't create a monster, okay? Because Pluto is in Aquarius is Frankenstein. But the Frankenstein story was that Frankenstein, yes, he was created, but he was his own entity. And when the creator tried to enforce Frankenstein to his own image, Frankenstein, just like the creator, because Frankenstein is the creation of a creator, meaning it's a creator, rebelled his creator, basically signaling that the creation time of Frankenstein is over. Now Frankenstein is creating itself. It's a sovereign being. Now, mm, mm, mm. Now here's an interesting Israel conquered Thailand. So where are the Thai people? In Israel. Where would they be? We evacuated the place and went to Thailand. So Thailand comes here, and then people are like, oh, there's a Thai person going there. Like, we need to pay attention. Don't pay attention. What were Israelis doing in Thailand? Raping children. Okay, that's not good news. And buying property illegally. That's okay as long as they don't rape. Oh, that's what Israel was doing with supporting Somaliland. And say, oh, Israel is trying to delay supporting Palestine. Like, well, is it? Is it what about? Is it what aboutism to ask how is Congo doing? Is Israel not taking it as a card to delay what's coming for the region? Of course it does. Is it not an effective card? Of course it is. Why people cared about Palestine? They're drilling oil in the Dead Sea. They were invested. Put the watermelon, have some children eat it. And you're looking good while investing there. It's the same old company anyway. Everyone's doing that. Now, when we see stupidity in Aries, we don't get mad. We begin to build a solution. Because, yeah, it was like amaranth could not be a lucrative business in a time where it was just growing free in the world. But the stupidity of ruining that crop is lucrative. If we can share the amaranth, we can share the world's resources. And if you know how to process a nettle, which is pretty simple, it's not refining oil, then you can be a part of the people that contribute to society with ease. And we're going to need it because after the war, everybody has agoraphobia, claustrophobia, post trauma. That person raped in the war, he come back with a post trauma. That person has post trauma from being raped even before the war. And that person that raped in the war can't talk about the fact that he was raped to prepare him to be a rapist in the war. And they are going to need a joint enemy to unite against. That's the people that sent them to war. But if the government says, hey, we all need people to grow some nettle, to grow some amaranth, to grow some purslane, to grow some this, to grow some that, and people are going to say, yeah, the stupid government is this and that, but hey, we're going to need amaranths, we're going to need purslane, we're going to need these things. That is actually a good thing to do. And so reason solves a lot of stupidities. Growing crops recovers from PTSD, recovers from sexual boundary violation. Restoring the land. Yes, Zuta. I don't know how to say that name of the herb in English. And this is what I mean when I say the spirit of the time gives us clues. The people are worried about AI, worried about this, worried about that. Well, I had a holistic health practitioner colleague, and she just married, and then they decided to grow their own food, and then they opened a place that sells vegan cheese and all really nice stuff, very tasty stuff that they did. And they said, at least we'll have food. Yes, maple is maple. And here is a funny thing. I wanted to buy the type of raisin that you don't cut the tree. And then I ended up buying 2 liters of maple syrup for my tea ceremony. It's not a big ceremony. There's a thing. I learned it from the Frisians. They would drink the first tea very sweetened, the second less, and the second less. And I wanted to do the same thing but with maple, or with the honey, or with the sweetener that is natural. Um, so I ended up acting funny. Um, but this is something that happens. Now we come to the water question. And this is where stupidity of the world can be really costly. Because the water they're going to sell us, think about it, mineral waters usually contain what? Fluoride. What's fluoride? The byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. Isn't that toxic? Hella toxic. It was collected to produce an A bomb. Okay, that's Feynman. And he worked in Los Alamos. We can't say it's not a good source of information. Then it was marketed as something that helps the teeth. How many people kept their wisdom teeth, about 30 and 40, in the last century? Some of it is structure, but not all of it. and then we coat our teeth to not have to look at what's in there. So that basically means that stupidity means people paying way more for irrigation because they were gonna need water after the radiation, but ending up buying radiation in well packaged. Have you noticed the trends of ownerless companies? You see, when the Israel-Palestine case broke, then people boycotted. Everybody wants me to say Starbucks, but hey, let's take a look at something more fancy. Teva Pharmaceutics. Teva Pharmaceutics later producing the Johnson and Johnson well-known risperidone risperidone is a reality test to Buffett's logic. Can a stupid person run a company? Because I think even Buffett would have to bail itself out of investing in a company that does that. So many class lawsuits won over this type of products in an atmosphere where psychiatry is used to silence people and people are no longer stupid about it. Somebody's trying to assassinate the investments of elderly people because if they didn't want to be invested in weapon trade or in Pfizer, then they were invested in Teva Pharmaceutics, which did have also medicine, let's say. Actually, people working in Teva Pharmaceutics, I heard them complain that they were being called Dr. Mengele. And they tried to consult lawyers about is this is, the lawyers were really evading the question. Now, a lawyer doesn't invade a question when they have an investment there. If the lawyers thought that they could make money out of representing these people in Teva Pharmaceutics that were called Dr. Mengeles, they would go for the